So hello, I'm James. I work for BAE, as has been mentioned. I work for a specific part of BAE called Digital Intelligence. So as was mentioned in the intro, so BAE, formerly British Aerospace Engineering, has branched out somewhat. So I can't remember which button it was. This one. So you probably think of BAE as planes. I don't know what any of those are. So please, no questions on planes. It's not just planes. Okay. So BAE has grown over time. So it started off as this aerospace engineering company. Planes are still very much in the picture. They're not part of BAE. They've just also branched out into other areas. So there's a land division. I know nothing about land. Don't ask me about land. There's a maritime division. I know nothing about maritime. Don't ask me about maritime. And then there's the bit that I work in, which is digital intelligence. So you know, ask me what is digital intelligence, and I can actually answer that one. So we do work across lots of different domains. So work in space. So you might have seen some launches if you really follow the space news, which I'm sure a lot of you don't, because I don't as well. But we've just had a bunch of launches of some satellites, and we did a lot of the software and connectivity for them. We do something called battle space integration. I'm not really going to talk about that a lot because I don't really know what it is. But the bits I do know about are cyber and digital. And the thing I'm particularly going to talk about today is digital. So I've been told to say the world has become increasingly digital, and the threats this poses to society from battle space to civilian cyberspace. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means in reality, because a lot of those words just don't make that much sense. So if we go into this, we work with lots of different government parts of government. So some of these are government, some of these are not. But things like the Home Office, we work with NHS Digital, we work with the Met Office. We're going to talk a little bit about some work we've done for Network Rail in the past, and a few others of these. So some of them you might expect, some of them you might not. But things like national highways, you probably didn't expect. And we're going to talk a bit about the AI integrations as well along the way. So this is a slide that I stole off a colleague because stealing is the best way of doing this thing. But imagine you're in a city, right? So there's lots of different things in the city. So you've got airports, maybe not in Cirencester. You've got train stations, maybe not in Cirencester. And you've got things like police stations and ports and all sorts of other stuff. So we'll start off with the ports and airports, right? So the UK has a lot of borders. So it has 144 airports, 15 of which are international airports. There's roughly 120 commercial ports, and depending on how you measure coastlines, there's about 8,000 miles of coastlines. So that's quite a lot of borders, right? So about 255 million passengers pass through UK airports every year, and about 21 million through seaports. And then you've got the things like Eurostar and the shuttle as well. And we're helping to provide the technology that allows for smooth transit while trying to detect the threats to the UK at the same time. And so if we do the best job in the world, nobody notices. If we do a bad job, it causes complete chaos. And I'm sure you've all been there before, where the security gates are ramo kablamo, and it takes you 500 hours to get through Lisbon Airport. Where my girlfriend is, where her family's from. We can't unfortunately do much in those scenarios. But the thing is, security is the thing we're after, right? So we also do work with the roads. So I mentioned the highways. So this includes things like ANPR, so automated number plate recognition technology. And we work with the police to track criminal gangs using this technology. I don't know if anyone's ever watched the program Hunted on TV, and you've seen where they can track cars that way. And we do things with the rails. So this includes things like optimizing timetables, automation center of excellence, making things cyber resilient transport networks is the word I'm supposed to use, which basically means let's not get our trains hacked, because that would be really bad and then we'll get stuck. And then we do things where we work with police forces to safeguard children as well. So there's a playground here. And we're going to talk about this one a little bit later as well. Some of that bit, a little bit dark. So if you do want to step out for a second during that section, just put your hand up and there will be a holding slide at that point. So I'm going to talk about a few projects. So all of these are on our website if you do want more information. I'm going to talk a bit about AI-driven analytics at Britain's borders. I'm going to talk about this project that we ended up winning an award for, which was to do with trying to prevent child sexual abuse, and then other stuff with National Crime Agency as well. So the first of these is a project called Cerberus. So I don't know if anyone here knows their Greek mythology. Cerberus was the multi-headed dog that protected the underworld in Greek mythology. They decided to use the name to talk about how we protect our borders as well. So this was some work we did at the Home Office. It actually predates my time with BAE, but it's one of the case studies they like talking about. So this was a large-scale data analysis platform, which was essentially trying to find the needle in a haystack, right? So when you're working at the borders and you're trying to find this needle in a haystack, you don't necessarily know what the needle looks like, because people like to do things like obscure what their drugs look like. They don't want you to have a nice big packet of pills that look like pills. They do all sorts of nasty, annoying things. Or other things like knives and guns and stuff like this, right? So the point of this is to try to find those weird looking needles in a haystack. And you've also got the complexity of your haystack tends to disappear in 15 minutes because there's a new haystack of people coming off a different plane. So it's very much about trying to find those really small, weird looking items in large amounts of data. This is very much a problem for AI. AI loves this sort of thing, being able to act rapidly at scale, being able to identify patterns, working with images, working with all sorts of stuff, right? So using the X-ray scanners and the images that come off those. So they've developed a real-time threat detection mechanism, which can then alert people on the borders about things they found. So this is a glossy page that someone's made. So as it said before, so we've got 300 million passengers go through at least one port, airport, Eurostar, or boat in the UK in a year. Those are not distinct. Those are often the same people multiple times. We've got nearly 400 million tons of freight, so objects that need to be scanned, of which we're trying to find things like 15,000 firearms that were seized last year. So when you look at 400 million tons and you're trying to find 15,000 firearms, this is a vanishingly small amount of stuff. Or 23,000 kilograms of Class A and Class B drugs. So this is less than 0.01% of the freight that's going through the UK. And it's really, really hard to find those things inside this. And we have to do it rapidly. And if you do it slowly, then everyone gets really annoyed because everyone gets stuck. So this next bit is talking about crimes against children. If people would like to step out for 2 minutes, there's absolutely no problem with that. There's no images, there's no descriptions. It's literally just text on screen, and I think that's probably the best way to do it with this. It's particularly talking about child sexual abuse, so if that is sensitive to people, please step out. Just a few seconds if anyone wants to. Okay. So this is a project called CCAT, so it's something that BAE has been working on for quite some time, and tagline is a much needed fight back against child sexual abuse offences online. So the task that was set out was obviously the problem about child sexual abuse material online. So in 2022, there were more than 100,000 recorded offences of sexual abuse against children in England and Wales, of which more than 250,000 web pages were identified as containing CSAM, so child sexual abuse material. The NSPCC estimates that as much as 1 in 20 children have been sexually abused. This is insane. This is absolutely insane. And a significant number of offences are never recorded, so these are likely to be underestimates. This is a stat that the NSPCC put out on the 5th of December this year, and they've got a campaign. You might have heard it on Radio 4 or other places at the minute. 2/3 of UK adults believe the risk of children being abused increases over Christmas as well. So you can see that this is a very pervasive problem, right? And by helping to remove some of this material from online, it means that fewer people see it. It means that the victims don't have to have that repeat of going through the same trauma. So the goals of this project were to reduce the harm to children, pursue the offenders, the people that are putting this material on there, protect victims, as well as preventing people from becoming new victims, right? So by making it more difficult for people, by making it harder for these people to put this material on there, they don't profit from it, they don't benefit from it, and the victims don't get abused. One of the most interesting points here is about preventing new people from becoming offenders. And again, it's taking away some of those incentives, but it's also stopping people from seeing this material. And by stopping them from seeing it, it then stops them from becoming more and more down that rabbit hole. And so the goal of this project was also, how do you make the most impact with the limited resources we do have, right? Because unfortunately, it's someone's job that has to go through and look at this material and remove it. And that's very, very distracting for some people, right? And they have to go through a lot of rigorous processes to make sure that they're doing that compliantly, to make sure they're not having adverse effects to them. So the solution that BAE worked on was to automatically scan these websites using AI tools to identify where the sexual abuse material, the child sexual abuse material is, and automatically report these sites for takedown. This only works in the UK because we only control so many web domains. And so this is really an international problem, right? And it's only by working with international partners and deploying this multiple times in lots of different places that we can really stop this. And it reduces the repeat victimization, but it's really been like a collaborative effort. So multi-country, multi-disciplined, it's been working with data scientists like myself, been working with domain experts and international relations as well. So the impact of this, so the team that worked on this created a simple and secure interface. They deployed this for new partners in under 24 hours, so they can go and take this abroad, they can go and take this to different agencies, and they can set up new instances that can remove this material as quickly as possible, right? At the time when this was written, 6 of them had been deployed, and I imagine that's grown quite a lot since then. They've not updated the information online. This has replaced a manual process that would have taken weeks just to remove like a single web page, and now they can do thousands in seconds. It provides a routine solution towards once a complex and distressing problem. In 18 months, this saved 9 months of analyst time, and that's analyst time that they can go and solve more complex problems that can't be done with AI. That's analyst time that they can then use for much better things. And so this was a stat that I think is quite showing, right? So in 2023, 2024, there was a decline in identification of child sexual abuse. And that's the first time in 9 years that number's come down. And I like to think that we had some part in that. It's not a project I worked on. I don't think I would have the mental fortitude to work on something like this, but the team that works on it are starting to have a real impact. So this is another project. So this is preventing crime through identifying risk. So this is an internal project that BAE identified themselves, have developed internally, and are sort of starting to push it out to police forces. So this is something called ILAS, so Intelligent Lead Assessment Service. This new technology, so ILAS, so it's a focus with attention on prevention, right? And the National Police Chiefs Council is like one of the most important things to them is preventing crime as opposed to dealing with it once it's already occurred. So the goals here are about reducing harm, tackling the root causes of crime, both in physical and the online space. There's a lot of crime that's moving online these days, and reducing offending by tackling the causes and opportunities. And so this is where ILAS comes in. So here's a little case study. So this is an example where someone was being released from prison. So they'd been in prison for quite a long time on drug trafficking offences. So this was a male that was leaving prison, that was moving in with a mother and her 14-year-old son. So her son had previously been found in possession of cannabis, and then had been in contact with the police, and they'd got a criminal record. So ILAS, so this new technology, identified that there was a relationship there, and that because a known drug trafficker that was leaving prison was moving in with a child, a 14-year-old, that had previously had issues with drugs, were moving in together, that there was a relationship here that needed to be identified. So this identified a valuable safeguarding opportunity and meant that the police could intervene before something bad happened. So this is talking about prevention of crime, right? Yeah, so this is just saying, prevented future child exploitation, drugs-related crime. So this is the tool. This is a slightly old version of the tool. It looks a little bit prettier these days. But I'll talk you through it slowly. So in this case, we've got Russell Godwin. So this is all simulated data. You don't have to worry about GDPR offences and things like this. So this is all made up. But so in this case, you've got Russell Godwin, who's 10 years old, and this is the network of individuals around him. And the size of each of these lines represents the threat by different people in their network. So in this case, it's Richard Ayala, and the tool has given him an 80% confidence that this is an exploitation risk from Richard Ayala. And so this is the timeline of events. So this would be offences that people in Russell Godwin's network have committed, or even Russell Godwin himself. So this would be things like drug incidents, or crimes that Richard Ayala and the rest of this group have committed. And sorry. Yeah, so in this case, it's sort of highlighting Richard Ayala, and then you can zoom in onto specific things in Richard Ayala's past. And then you can also flip this around, right? So in the other example, we looked at the victim first approach. So that was Russell Godwin. But in this approach, it's Karen Gonzalez, and who is she likely to exploit? Who is she likely to be a threat to in her network? So this technology is all based on graph analytics, large-scale data, where you can find connections between information. So this is a slightly different approach to like the historic approach of databases, and this allows you to sort of draw links, and then you can start to do things like graph machine learning, which is a branch of AI, where you can then say, okay, we've seen patterns of behavior like this before. We've seen examples where drug traffickers are moving in with young offenders and things like this. And so this is an example. So this bottom graph here, so this is called the dumbbell graph, and the colors show which nodes in the graph. So graph in this instance being like a network, not like a chart. The colors on this show which nodes are exhibiting similar behavior, and then we can take them into the embedding space on the right-hand side and say these are very similar in what they exhibit right now, and therefore they're likely to behave similarly in the future. So you can also embed expert knowledge in to ILAS as well. So this is why we work with domain experts, this is why we work with the police, who can tell you examples of where some of this is likely to turn into offence behaviour, particularly where we've not got enough data to do machine learning. But a lot of this can be done through machine learning, where there are high propensities for some of this stuff to happen. And so GAINS, so this is a team that I work in. So name is Growing AI in National Security. So what GAINS is a internal consultancy team. So we go out to a lot of our project teams and we give them advice on how they can integrate AI into their systems. We talk about things like how they can use AI for writing code, and do that in a way that doesn't have the hallucinative effects that modern AI tools sometimes have. So for example, ChatGPT, just making up things that don't exist and things like that. So we provide a lot of advice, we provide training, we talk to people that have integrated it successfully, and take those examples and then play them back to other teams so we can get that benefit and learning. So to summarize, so BAE, it's not just planes. Please stop asking me about planes at every party. But we also work with UK government. So this is to help protect our borders, this is to help protect our transport systems, and this is to help prevent crimes and help protect our children. And I'm going to shamelessly plug for jobs. If any of you would like to find out more about this stuff, there's stuff on our website. But we always need more people. We always need people to come and talk to us and bring in new skill sets, bring in new viewpoints, bring in new things like this. And so if you are interested, we're looking for consultants, software engineers, data scientists, program managers, delivery managers. And you can basically work in most places in the country, although not all jobs are available in every place. So essentially, that is everything I was going to talk about. And if there's any questions. Yes, yourself.
Yes, thank you. you mentioned the Cerberus activity.
Yep.
Would you be able to go back and see, for example, whether the two agents that came in from Russia, the Novichok pair, whether you'd detected them using Cerberus if you'd had it when they arrived?
Interesting question. I don't know the answer to that. I would love to, and I'd love to go and ask the team that put it together. I suspect probably not with Cerberus, based on the fact that it's more scanning things like freight. I think you'd probably have to use other tools. But yeah, I think there's been quite a big review of things like that since then, and it's more to do with.
Do you use more recent examples of real events to test whether your systems would detect?
Absolutely, yeah. So pretty much all systems are tested on real data. They're not necessarily specific, like one-off pieces of data. It's more like large-scale amounts, and then you can tend to come up with things like accuracy scores to say how well we think these are going to work in reality. So we use accuracy, precision, recall, all these sorts of stats, the same as you would in medical and in other places. And part of the work we do in games, in growing AI and national security, is to help people build them into the systems as well, but then teach the operators how those stats like accuracy, precision, and recall will affect the results. And so when they should trust AI and when they shouldn't trust AI, and when they should be skeptical, right? So we do try to, yeah.
Thank you.
I think there's this Barbara.
You're not working with BT?
As far as I know, we're not. No. I don't know. We might be. I don't know everything. It's a very big company.
Get rid of those nuisance calls.
So
it seems incredible to me that it's all digital coming in, and the information's there. Surely AI could be screening them and stopping the run.
So I actually used to work for BT quite a few years ago. And it wasn't when I was working there, but I do know that they did create a AI tool that would essentially waste scammers' time. And so that would just tie up a lot of the scammers. And so the AI call would come in, and using tools like ChatGPT and like voice ones, and it would just like spout nonsense at them and just keep them on the phone for a long time. Yeah, they put some like comms out about this, and I think you can probably Google it. I can't remember what it's called. I think it wasn't Ask for Angela, because I think that's a different thing, but it was along the same lines as this, right?
It seems to me that we've recently had a number of very high profile, very expensive hacking incidents.
Yeah.
Places like Jaguar Land Rover,
yeah.
NHS, etc. I think there's a desperate need for a tool which analyses the behaviour of people in companies and tells them they're at high risk because of the way people inside the companies are behaving and the way the networks are configured. Because, Jaguar Land Rover hacking didn't need to happen.
No.
It was entirely because of the way the people in the company were behaving that it happened. Saying, NHS, admittedly, part of that is just they've got old kit and they can't afford to replace it, but still there ought to be a risk indicator which says you're running at really high risk here.
Yes, no, I completely agree. It's not my exact specialist area is cyber stuff. I'm more working digital, but I do know that the NCSC run a thing for companies, and all companies in the UK can sign up to this and get warnings around their threat from cyber intelligence stuff. It's not my area of expertise, but I think it's open to all companies in the UK. And I think, I'm not sure, I don't know enough about Jaguar Land Rover stuff. Yes, I don't even know if it would be AI powered either. I think it doesn't need to be AI powered in that case, but yeah.
The Border Force application and the child sexual abuse application, the AI is quicker. Is it more accurate? What's the false positive and false negative rates? Do you know?
I don't know on these ones, unfortunately. So
I don't. A human though. So
yeah. I think. So I didn't work on each of those projects. They both predated my time with BAE. But I think some of it is that they can do this much faster, right? And while there's 250,000 of those web pages up, I don't know how many people that would take to manually do all those things. So like I said, I don't know the accuracy scores on those, but being able to take down 90% of those is still going to be better than what was previously able to be done. I'm just plucking numbers out of the air.
On the basis that AI advances approximately doubles every 12 months,
Okay.
at what point will mankind forget GB, which is always behind the times, run out of energy to run the systems?
It's a good question. So I think a lot of the research that's going on at the minute is around trying to make these things much quicker, much more efficient, use less energy as well. So there was some stats on ChatGPT that said that every query from ChatGPT uses less water than like a teaspoon or something like this. So I think there is definitely pushes towards making the models smaller, making them use less energy. And there's one of the architectures they use is they call it like teacher-student models. So you take a very large model that's been trained, like ChatGPT, and you use that to train a smaller model because there is inefficiencies built into the structure of it. And they can actually get pretty good results out of those things to make these
Do you
things.
think quantum computing would help? Because they're doing it's like running in parallel rather than digital systems running in series.
Not my area of expertise is quantum computing. I'd love to know more about it. I think possibly quantum computing doesn't work in all cases that standard computing does, and so it might be one of these edge cases. I don't know, but I think there are some things around quantum AI that's in development, which would be specifically designed with quantum chips and things like this. But yeah, it's a bit beyond the sort of work I do day to day, so I don't know. And I'm sure being more up to date on quantum stuff will be more and more relevant because it's only going to grow.
The examples you showed, the border force seems to be quite a physical thing. You're looking for weapons, drugs, which are, entities.
Yeah.
The other one was a bit like a CRM system, a relationship manager between all the different people.
Yeah.
Again, quite physical. You looked at the emotional side. So someone who was an offender, you could monitor their behaviour while they're in prison, which is meant to be not a punishment, but a rehab sort of thing. Do you think AI could then simulate the human brain emotionally to see if they're going to re-offend and how to prevent that from an emotional side, not just the contact, removing it from the physical, getting it?
So I think the answer is probably yes. I think there's not a huge amount of money in our prison systems, and that's probably the limiting factor on doing research and things like that. I think you could basically do like a risk assessment using AI tools, and I don't know enough about it. They might do already at the point of leaving prison. And I think the thing you're talking about would involve like active monitoring across a prison of someone's time in prison. I think that would probably be a bit breachy of like data protection laws. But I think probably like at the end of like someone's criminal term in prison would probably be the better time to do it, and you can use records. And I think like one of the problems with a lot of societies, there's a lot of stuff still handwritten, and like handwriting analysis is getting better, and you can extract a lot of information out of it. But my handwriting is terrible, so I'd love to see AI try and read my handwriting. I think that's probably going to be one of the limiting factors on it. But yeah, I don't know enough about the prison system, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's do this one first, then this one. Yeah.
One of the issues which gets discussed quite a lot in the forums is the building bias into AI systems, particularly in crime reporting, because it's thought, certainly there's a lot of evidence that there are inbuilt biases in the way crime is controlled in terms of different groups in society tend to be targeted more than others.
Yeah.
So how do you avoid in your system like ILAS actually building in your information is coming from the police? How do you avoid actually building in the biases that are potentially already there in the way they deal with those issues?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there was a very famous example, and it was from about 2017, I think, when some of these tools weren't so well developed, and it was around. I think it was Amazon had built a system to scan over CVs, and they wanted it to be completely bias free, and so they stripped out any gender identifiers and things like this. And what it had done is it ended up still selecting like all male candidates or something like that, and it used some of the hidden factors in there around like which university they went to, had like a skew and things like this, and which hobbies they had and things like this, because things like netball tend to get played more by women. So this was like one of the early days examples of where people were starting to look at these things. It's still a big problem. I'm not gonna lie, it's still a big problem, and I think particularly with things like ChatGPT, where they have more like a more probabilistic way of making decisions. So like every single time you put a prompt into ChatGPT, a question, it'll give you a slightly different result, right? Yeah, and what you find is that very few people will actually test enough different questions, because essentially you've got an infinite space of questions and an infinite space of answers, and not enough people are doing these sorts of tests. And I think it's scary, right? But I think AI is such a broad thing, and when you look at ChatGPT and things like this, it's very hard to test it. But when you have more specific, targeted versions of what we used to call machine learning, as opposed to AI systems, which are really targeted, and they have things like just yes, nos, or like classifiers across like 10 different categories and things like this, then it's much easier to test it. And I think particularly the work we try and do in games is teach people the best way to do those sorts of things to help prevent bias. And you know, ask people the question: have you tested it for bias? And more often than not, they say no. And you go, right, this is the sorts of things you need to look out for. And have you tried like putting things through like gender bias and stuff like that? Yeah, but I don't know. It's still a big problem.
I personally experienced issues. I worked in the nuclear industry.
Okay.
And one of the things that happens if you develop a good software system,
yeah,
people get to trust it excessively.
Yes.
You know, you say this is supposed to be a supervised system.
Yeah.
You know, you're expected to watch over it to make sure it doesn't do something stupid. And they don't. After a while, you know, it runs for 5 years without giving any problems, and they say it's going to run forever without giving any problems. But in fact, your target reliability may be one failure in 100 years.
Yeah.
You know, and that is a real problem. These systems, once they get into service and once they show they're effective, they actually change the people who
Yes.
are using them. It's not just saying this is the problem that these people have now. You give them a new system, you have a different bunch of people by the time they've been using them for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I completely agree. And so in games, in this team that I work in, it's not just data scientists, right? We've also got user interface people in there as well, and they will help to put, you know, make sure that there's warnings on the screen where they need to be warnings, help to make sure that the workflows that the people that are using these tools take into account the biases and things like this. So, and then some of it's training as well, and that's training for users, that's training for the developers of these tools to make sure they're building them and making sure that these alerts and warnings are in there. It's never going to be perfect, but the more people we have working on these sorts of problems, the better, right? So we're trying, is all I can say. Yep.
The child sexual abuse websites closing down. The users will have to pay for that somehow. Is there any way to track back through those payments to get lists of users?
Again, I don't know the specifics. I don't work on that project because I can't go through all that sorts of stuff. Like it's not the sort of material I want to be looking at, and these people have to look on it. I'd imagine it probably is, yeah, but I don't know. I'd have to ask the team that works on it. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that. Yes.
How much does GDPR stop you doing any of this effectively?
So it's not actually called GDPR anymore. So after Brexit, they actually changed it to the Data Protection Act. But essentially, it's the same set of laws, right? They just changed the name because Brexit, right? I mean, we have to make sure we're compliant with it, and it's never really been a big blocker. It's more just about teaching people how to stay compliant with it and making sure that you're documenting where you think there might be risks and making sure that you're having the right conversations about how you can minimize those and minimize the amount of data so that you're not just saying, give me everything, give me only the specific stuff that's relevant, and then making sure you hold on to that data for the right amount of time. Generally, we don't own the data, we just make the systems. So when we integrate it for one of our partners, it's making sure that they do it in the right way. Yeah.
So what are the sort of major problems you're finding in the project you're working on?
Oh, sorry?
What are the major problems you're finding in the project you're working on, and how are you trying to sort of rectify the issues that are happening?
So a lot of the thing I'm doing at the minute is this sort of internal training piece around how people can use these AI tools. So we've done some internal surveys of how people are using not ChatGPT but like our internal tool, because we don't want people using the open web. We don't want people putting things on the open web that they shouldn't be putting on there. But we did ask the question, how are you using, which tools are you using? And a couple of people did say they're using like ChatGPT, and we had to be like, maybe you shouldn't be putting these things on the web when we've got this internal tool, like making sure that people are doing that sort of thing. I mean, they were using it in completely benign ways, but it just, let's mean that you don't reinforce that behavior. So some of it's that, some of it's software engineering practices. So trying to make sure that when people are using software engineering AI tools, so not ChatGPT, but there's specific ones that will help you write code, that they are still testing the code in the right way, that they're not just, taking the code and putting it into production systems, that they are still having like manual checks. At the moment, like human in the loop is the term that everyone uses. So maybe you have an AI assistant help you write the code and then a human reviews it. But, people get over trusting, people trust it way too much, and so you have to make sure that they're not doing that. So yeah, we're still in the discovery phase because these tools are still new and they develop and they get better and better. And the things that were true 6 months ago of this, where it was hallucinating, is less and less. So it's trying to make sure that people are up to date with their knowledge, people are up to date with their learning, but also that people are getting the benefits from them where the opportunities are, because if we don't, other people will, and we'll fall behind. So those are the sorts of things we're looking at. Mark.
So if you're teaching people how to implement AI in all of these different situations, presumably you get people who have absolutely no idea how it works, what it does. Do you have any crazy examples of people who just thought it could like save the world or scan their brains?
Not at work, because the people that are joining, BAE Digital Intelligence are interested in this stuff and they want to stay up to date. So we've got quite a captive audience that are wanting to try out new things. I think in the wider world, like one of the things that someone senior at work said to me was, oh, we need lots of new kids because they're all staying up to date with technology, blah, blah, blah. And actually, when we went out and spoke to people, we had people of every single age group, every single seniority. Some of them were AI super users, were doing things that I didn't know was possible. And other ones of them that you'd expect to be adopting new tools and adopting new techniques were complete laggards and hated it and didn't want to do a single thing. So it's individual, it's case by case, right? But I think most of it has been around the skepticism side of people thinking it's going to hallucinate, people it's going to do things like this, rather than it's going to eat my brain. Yes.
I was going to ask, are all the AI tools you use made in the USA or owned by American corporations and Chinese corporations, or are some of them British owned and maybe, well, who owns all these? I mean, I know about ChatGPT, but who owns all the range of things you use?
I don't know is the short answer, but so I think there's a mix, right? So some of them are open source and some of them are corporate, and so I think we tend to have a split across both. And some of them are trained. There's actually a UK-based AI startup that I was reading about like a couple of weeks ago that had actually just made like this amazing new frontier model. So the UK is definitely in that equation as well. I don't know which ones we have internally. Sometimes they obscure the exact model, but we're changing it. We have a suite of different ones that we use for different purposes. But yeah, it's not just all US, and we try to avoid using the Chinese ones.
When I use the Chinese one, DeepSeek or ChatGPT, it always says, what an intelligent question I asked. Do the ones you use, or are you using them at such a high level that they no longer praise you?
So it's interesting. Depends how you use them. So you can tell them, don't praise me. You can say, be critical, and you can say to them, like, tell me what are the flaws with this plan. Because a friend of mine, he came to me and said, I've got this really great idea for a company, blah, blah, blah. I can't remember exactly what it was. So he was really excited about this idea. He'd been having this long conversation with one of these AI agents. And he thought it was going to be his £1 million idea. And within one small 5-second conversation with me, I was like, have you thought about that? And he goes, no. But I think if you ask the AI agent to be like a critical friend is often, and you can give it like a bit of a prompt to say, be a critical friend, tell me what are the flaws of this. I really want to know what the flaws are, rather than just telling me I'm great. Then I think it's actually the way you use it sometimes. But so it's actually built into the training process. So when they train these models, they use a technique called, I'm going to get this wrong. Well, it's human-based reinforcement learning, right? So where they give it is fine-tuning, but it's based on the human's responses. So fine-tuning could just be on a specific task. But what they've essentially done is they farmed it out to lots of people and said, tell us which of these responses you like, and it'll like generate 2 responses, and you say, I like that one, I don't like that one. And that's why it's a bit sycophantic, particularly some of the ones from the US. But that's where it comes from. But again, at the same time, some people like to have a critical friend, and so within that training, there will be some people from that training set that like having people critique them. So you just need to tell it to act in that way, as opposed to just always telling you you're great.
That's enough.
Yeah, sorry.
Critical minerals is something that's in
sorry, I couldn't hear.
Capturing the source of critical minerals.
Okay.
Is something it's very, very much in vogue at the moment. Mining industry is fairly primitive in its use of AI in terms of finding new deposits. You can tell that because of the velocity of discoveries. Does BAE work on applying AI not only to discover new deposits, but on how to source critical minerals from recycling material and other things?
I have absolutely no idea. I don't think we work in that space, but it's a very big company. Maybe. It doesn't seem like the sort of thing we would do. Yeah.
Slightly off piece, I'm afraid, but I met a friend who works at Google the other day.
Okay.
And I said, how much data is being put up today? And he said, about 5 times all the data that's ever been put up until yesterday. How on earth are we going to keep up with the data centers? How are we going to have enough?
I don't know.
No, I know.
I hadn't heard that stat before. That sounds unrealistic, but I don't know. I think particularly with these new tools, there's going to be a lot of AI generated content out there, right? And we were just I mentioned this earlier when we were having a meal, was this thing called the dead internet theory, where there's just going to be pretty much everything on the internet is AI generated. It doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. There could be a lot of useful content there that's actually still relevant. But one of the problems with that is when you start using the AI generated content in your models to generate new models, and you get this cycle where it's just learning off of stuff that it's already generated, and then it has this thing called mode collapse, and then it just ends up being like the worst case scenario for everyone. So one of the problems with creating these new models is trying to find clean data that's been human generated. But yeah, I don't know.
The pace of development is so rapid. It wasn't that long ago we were restricted to 5 minutes on Google.
I don't remember those times.
Not that long ago.
I think my dad maybe gave me 6.
All right.
Yeah.
Can AI be used to look forward and predict? They're taking maturing organised criminal activity, so scammers, fraudsters, etc. Can it be used to build enough historical information to then look forward to say what their likely next move on a maturing model could be?
I mean, absolutely, AI can be used for prediction. So that's kind of what the ILAS stuff is talking about, is identifying those risks. And the risk is that they're going to go on and do something, right? But yeah, it's like there's been machine learning models that have been used for prediction for a number of years. So at the start of my career, when I worked in marketing and sales, it was used to find the propensity that someone's going to buy the next product and things like this. I chose to stop doing that because I found it quite boring. But yeah, it's been used for a long time to do predictive analytics. Yes.
Talked about using AI to predict resilience against attacks.
Yeah.
The guy over there was asking about the source of AI. Maybe I'm thinking it's like a few big supercomputers somewhere dotted around UK or globally. If Putin and his boat start digging up cables, are we going to lose AI and hence lose all the protection it's giving us?
Good question. So no, but it depends what you mean by lose AI, right? So
I don't know how cloud-based it is, whether it's everywhere, so you can take chunks out.
So you right now can go home, download one of these models, and have a copy of it on your computer,
right?
And then you won't ever lose it. That won't be the best model that ever exists because there's going to be new models that come out. But I've downloaded a few on my computer at home, and I've got them to do menial tasks for me. They're on the web. You can just download them, particularly the Llama models, which are the Facebook-made ones. So it depends what you mean by lose AI, right? Like we would lose connectivity to some countries in that scenario, but
I guess we're reliant on so many systems now that we then become reliant on those businesses staying in business. And a lot of devices are being taken offline intentionally because they're not cyber secure. Nest heating controllers, for one that's been in the press recently. The more reliance you have on the systems, the more you start to look at what is that system, who's looking after it, how if we're becoming reliant on it.
Yeah. I mean, over reliance on technology has been a problem before AI as well, right? Have you ever tried to get to Cirencester to Cheltenham after 8 p.m. on a bus? It just doesn't happen unless you're on a cycle for 3 hours in the dark. So that's quite a mundane example, but we are reliant on technology.
Always will be.
Yeah.
Hiya. With predictive policing, I can understand the benefits. If you've got a sex offender who's going to be moving in with a child, and you can identify that. But a lot of people are worried about kind of this predictive policing and where it would go, and that it could end up being a kind of a large-scale monitoring society. And as the gentleman up here said, there's biases in the police force, there's biases. So who directs how that monitoring is going to happen and how intrusive, invasive that is? And who draws the line as to where that is sort of driven?
Yeah, so the thing that I like to say is it's shared responsibility. So it's partly our responsibility as the people who are making the technology to inform the users of where the bias is or potentially could be, and where the for example, like the line should be drawn. So if we said there's an 80% chance of something happening here, 80%, like 20% of the time it won't happen. And so the thing we try to do is inform people of what those sorts of things are. But then the other part of the shared responsibility is the users, right? And so we try to give them the most information possible, but then they also have to make sensible decisions. And, you know, people haven't done anything wrong in a scenario. And so you have to just do, so in this case, safeguarding, right? So they haven't gone and arrested anyone, but they've just taken, you know, safeguarding action to try to prevent something from potentially happening.
Could there be a chance that it could turn into something more sinister almost, something that could be like a very, very in-depth monitoring of, you know, human beings in general? Could that be
I think that's a political question rather than anything else, right? So that's not necessarily something that we get involved in. It's very much like, you know, if you live in some of the other countries in this world, then that happens already. And it's to do with the environment. And if you elect a government that does things like that, then it's going to do things like that.
How would organised crime not just respond, but also use AI to respond to you? Or have you noticed any of that happening?
So how would they respond in what way do you mean, sorry?
Well, are they changing their methods in terms of figuring out ways in which, because it's getting detected more in terms of transportation of goods, or and also are they starting to use AI as well?
So, I mean, there's probably outside of the stuff I know about, but there's a reason I didn't go into super loads of detail on this, because I didn't want to tell you exactly how it works, and that's because, you know, this is being recorded, it's going on the internet, and anyone can watch that. So we're very cautious with saying what we say openly around what the limitations are and things like that. I don't know super loads of detail about how organised crime works. We just build technology and we speak to the people that do, and they give us advice on the things they're noticing. So yeah, that's more of a question for policing and things like that rather than for me. But I think it's a good question.
I think, James, we're going to have to wrap this up because we've got some candies out there.
Lovely stuff.
Share with everyone to wish them a very Merry Christmas. But you're here to ask questions if anyone wants to.
Oh yeah. Come chat to me at the bar. Buy me a drink.
Right. Please do come and start the celebration.